Greetings, I'm Herbert Erpaderp, and today we're going to have a look at what's in this box. If you look at the box really carefully, you might be able to infer that this is a 35th scale A7V kit from Meng. Obviously, I was inspired to purchase this by my recent visit to see Mephisto, the only surviving A7V in the world, which resides in Queensland Museum's Anzac Legacy Gallery. I'll link that video in the description. I had actually kind of hoped that the museum would have a kit like this in the gift shop, but they didn't. I bought the shirt instead. Anyway, you might notice this little sticker here that says used in Australian military service, which is a little bit incorrect, and when I saw this, I did have a sensible chuckle. I assume that what they mean with this is that while the kit is not specifically intended as a representation of Mephisto, it does come with a set of decals, so you can decorate it as Mephisto, which is located in Australia. Might be a little bit of a stretch, but maybe that's what they mean. Clearly Australia never used the A7V in military service. We just stole it. Okay, enough waffling. Let's look at some bits of plastic. The sprues in this kit are moulded in a light grey, almost white colour, which is fine, but it is a little bit annoying to try and photograph and video. That's probably not really a problem for most people, I guess. On the upside, if any of the parts get dropped on the floor, the lighter colour might make them a little bit easier to find. At least for me. My floor is pretty close in colour to the grey most kits are moulded in. Maybe don't drop the parts! Don't tell me what to do. You might have noticed that the box mentions this kit has an interior, and here are some of those internal parts. I assume all these levers are for the driver. They do look rather good. All of the parts in this kit do. My pictures might not do them justice, but everything here is very neatly moulded, and while mould lines are just a fact of life for modelers, they're pretty minor in this kit, and I don't think there's going to be too much cleanup required, especially if you can clip the parts off the sprues neatly. The detail in this kit looks pretty good. It's quite clear that I'm not an A7V surgeon, so I can't tell you if it's 100% accurate, but there are plenty of bolts and rivets for those who like to count that kind of thing. I don't know if the correct amount are present, but they do look nice and crisp, so the resulting model should be a pretty good, reasonably accurate representation of an A7V. Obviously, if you are a rivet counter, and you find the number of rivets present to be inaccurate, this would be a good starting point for whatever conversions and modifications you feel necessary. That's not really my sort of thing, and I feel like the detail this kit has is probably going to be more than good enough for most modelers. Having had a nice close look at Mephisto, I feel like if you're going to do any modifications to this kit, removing some of the rivets and bolts and covering it in dings and dents would be a good first step. I'm not yet sure if I'm going to do anything like that myself when I build this, but it is an option. I don't know about you folks, but one of the things I really enjoy about World War I era stuff is the fact there's big bolts and rivets pretty much everywhere. It's obviously not the best construction method. I don't imagine bits of rivet flying around the fighting compartment is very helpful, but as a modeler, I think they're great, along with the big chonky hinges on stuff. They are fun to paint, and you can really add a lot of interesting weathering around them. Obviously they're realistic too, which is important, but from a purely visual standpoint, I think they add a lot of interest. Maybe I'm just waffling a bit. Oh really, Herbert waffling? I never would have thought. You don't need me to narrate and tell you about each part on the sprues anyway. You can see them, and they kinda speak for themselves. Not literally, but you know what I mean. I probably don't know what most of them are anyway. I do know, however, at the risk of repeating myself, they look very nice. I'm especially excited about probably not having to spend hours cleaning up tiny detail parts. Something that does have potential to take a lot of time is the tracks. It looks like each track link is going to be made up of 2 parts, which in the grand scheme of things isn't too bad. They seem a lot like the tracks the Meng Whippet had. I'm not anticipating these to be too much trouble, but even though they're neat and shouldn't require too much cleanup, it is still going to be a bit time consuming, no matter how trouble-free the actual process is. There's just a lot of links. Something else there's a lot of is wheels. There are 4 sprues of wheels and their associated bits of doodadery. It's no Churchill, but there really are quite a few wheels. It's almost a shame that a lot of the suspension and running gear will barely be visible, if at all. I guess the same could be said about the interior. These huge radiators are really interesting to look at, and while you can model the hatches open, the A7V does have some quite large doors to look through, it is still going to be a bit hard to see everything. Part of the process of building a kit like this is deciding how far to go with the interior and figuring out how to make it as visible as you can, either by modelling doors and hatches open, or having some parts be removable, like the roof, though it can be hard to make the model look good with removable parts. I guess that's really something for future Herbert to worry about. Present Herbert is just kind of waffling and not talking about how the plastic in this kit is really nice and how he thinks it's going to go together really well. There is, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, some photo etch. Not really my favourite thing in the world, to be honest, but there isn't really a whole lot here, and none of it seems to be excessively tiny, so I feel like it shouldn't be too much of an annoyance. Here's the towing cable. This is the same as the one included in Meng's Whippet. It's fairly flexible and not too annoying to work with. Definitely much better than towing cables made of string. This is the part I'm sure most of you have been waiting to see. Polycaps. They do polycap things. Here's the decals. You only get markings for schnock. If you do happen to want to model other A7Vs, I'm sure there's probably aftermarket options available. What I wasn't really expecting when I bought this was that you get a sheet of Mephisto decals, complete with the Devilly character yoinking a British tank, which a lot of people have mentioned looks like a surfboard. I don't know if this is a standard inclusion with this kit, or if it's specific to those sold in Australia, or something like that. The sticker on the box, and the fact that the decals are visibly different to the other sheet, would suggest they're an addition. I wasn't really paying attention when I bought it. Either way, I think it's cool. And to build it, I'll use these instructions, which is going to be so much better than just guessing at how everything goes together. I do like that these are in booklet format, with a staple in the middle. I'm not overly fond of the fold-out kind of instructions, especially for a kit that's a little bit more complicated like this one. I say that, but the instructions themselves don't really look all that complicated. Things are laid out neatly, so it's easy to understand, and there isn't too much going on in any one step, though it does get a little bit more crowded in some of the later steps. I haven't really had a close look at the instructions. There isn't really much point in me doing that while I'm not actually building the model. I'm sure it'll be fine and dandy though. If there are any problems, I'll be sure to mention them in the build video. In addition to the instructions, you get a couple of painting and marking guides. One for Schnock, I'm probably saying that wrong, and one for Mephisto, which I clearly forgot to take a picture of at the same time as everything else, but here it is. These are handy as a starting point, but of course, you can decorate your model any way you like, with any brand of paints you happen to like, even if it's dollar store hot pink. I would suggest though not to use the cheap dollar store paints. Pink would be rad though. Okay, so that's what's in the box. This looks like a really nice kit, and I think it's going to be fun. I'm not anticipating any real problems, but of course, having not built the kit yet, I could be totally off here, but I don't think so. I have only built a couple of Meng kits before, but they were good experiences with, in my opinion, good results, so I'm expecting this to be much the same. It is obviously an interesting subject, and it's always a treat to build something from the First World War. If you would like to watch me build this live, I will be streaming the build, probably only over on Twitch. I'm not really sure it's worth multi-streaming to YouTube, so I think I'm going to stop that. I'm not really sure when I'll begin, but I am pretty excited about this kit, so I will start fairly soon. There's a link for Twitch in the description below. If you're interested, keep an eye on the schedule, or look for notifications on Discord. There's a link for Discord in the description too. There will also, eventually, be a build video here on YouTube, but that's not going to be for a while, unless it's the future. If it is the future, there'll be a link for that video in the description as well. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments section below. Subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of thing. Share it with anybody you think might find it helpful, and if you really like what I do, consider supporting on Patreon or Ko-fi. Take care of yourselves, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.